Barry Cryer, do you think we need to rethink what old age is and what older people are capable of?
Yes, I think it's the cliche of old age, and your delicate wording, incontinent, smelly, and whatever the other one was. Yes, I think that I'm 75, but in my head I'm middle-aged. You know, and then you stop and think, how many 150-year-old men do you know? It gives you pause for thought. But I don't think you can generalise at all. It's like you say, it's about ability and it's about the grasp and about behaviour. You cannot put people in a box.
But it matters, this, because all kinds of areas of social policy hang upon it. You know, whether people actually need a pension in their 60s or whether they're capable of something else. All these sort of issues are about how we think about being older, aren't they? I mean, Ros Altman, what do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, most people nowadays are not old at 60 or 65 in the way previous generations were. The problem is that we are keeping people alive much longer. We've had tremendous advances in healthcare, in medicine, in working practices, so that when you actually are at work, it's not physically demanding as it was before. But somehow society hasn't moved on, pensions haven't moved on, and you're still throwing people on the scrap heap, as you did before, when they are not ready, and they shouldn't be ready. You know, we should look at people individually. Some people are old in their 50s. Many people are not old in their 70s.
Exactly. Anne Widdecombe, come on.
Yes, I think it's quite interesting there, because Ros talks about, you know, how medical science has enabled us to live longer. We haven't stopped. We haven't stopped. And if there are big breakthroughs in medical science, such as, for example, a cure for Alzheimer's, there's going to be a very considerable elongation of life. And I think one of the things we've got to ask ourselves is, and we're not, never mind the pensions, how are we going to cope as a society with health and all the rest of it of a seriously long-living elderly population? How are we going to do it?
When you hear this kind of discussion and you hear the so-called old people's czar and other advocates on behalf of older members of society, as a person who's clearly got a very big beef, what do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of valid points. In fairness, we shouldn't have an ageist society, whether it be young or old. I think the maltreatment and the unfortunate circumstances of poor elderly people are terribly unfortunate, and we should do something to address them. But actually, all of this is something of a red herring by comparison to the substantial and very fundamental problems that young people in Britain now face today, not just regarding whether they save, but also in terms of jobs and housing and other fundamental issues.
So the people who discriminate against not the old people, but young people?
Well, young people get crowded out. That's what happens.
But don't actually young people have a stake in the well-being of their parents and grandparents?
Of course.
You're setting up this kind of false battle. And actually, I want my parents to have good healthcare, decent pensions. I don't actually resent my taxes being spent on that. Why does it have to be a fight?
Well, to be explicit, I didn't, under any circumstances, say that I resented my taxes being spent on that. Quite the reverse. But what I do think is that in terms of these kind of debates, and plenty like them, we get a crowding out of the complexity of this. So, I mean, in essence, I suspect we agree.
Pat,
I mean, there is a reciprocity.
From a historian's point of view, have we sort of redefined what old age is, and could we redefine it to be something, again, different?
Well, I think in the sense that people are more able at later ages to do more things, they're physically more active. There's been a great change. And more older people are active if they're not in the workforce. The contribution of older people to the voluntary sector is enormous, and it's been expanding. Voluntary service overseas, it used to be for 18-year-olds. Now, a very high proportion are people in their 60s and 70s who are massively more useful and skilled working in developing countries, if they're teachers or doctors or engineers. So there has been a real change in the input of older people.
But in that case,
society.
if that's the case, and you're not talking about exporting old people, of course you're not. But why does this stereotype go on?
Because
it's
go on. You've both got ideas. You can have a.
Well, no, but I think you know, you get to 60, which I am, and you ask the same question you've asked yourself all your life: how to live well harder, because you know, and here I pick up your point, is that, you know, you're in the last active decade. Probably. Well, you
Maybe
probably.
not.
I mean, there might be another one afterwards. No. But you do ask yourself the question harder about what it means to live a life well, what kind of trade-offs you want to make between work and leisure, what really counts in one's life. And at the limit, you are going to, put your foot down and say, well, I'm not going to work a 60-hour week or whatever, because actually I've done that, been there, got the T-shirt, and now you want different trade-offs. And I think that, and not just that's not a bad thing. I think those questions are asked. You're asking the same question: how to live a life well. It's just it's more urgent when you're older. And I think that's recognised by everybody, and you conduct yourself slightly differently
but
thereby.
If old people persist in believing that all that awaits them is some sort of gummy pointlessness, then the economy, apart from anything else, just isn't going to work anymore, is it? I mean, we need people to be doing things.
That's a really important point, which I think we haven't really explored yet. And you look at the demographics, next year is the year that the baby boomers start hitting 65. Millions more of them come through. If they stop working in the way that they used to, they will have very little money to live on. That is a recipe for economic decline. That will make fewer jobs available for the younger workers. We need to keep older people economically active, both for themselves and their own benefit, but also for the benefit of everyone else in the economy. And that's part of the answer. As Will was saying, people can work part-time. It's a better life. 2 or 3 days a week work, 4 or 5 days a week free, but more money to spend.
That's a good point to stop, I'm afraid, because apart from anything else, we all need to go to bed because we're all getting on a bit.